Well, 2013, most people reckon was a difficult year. Even the president admits that it was a challenging year. He says 2014 is a year of hope. Of course, we've seen some things that have been outlined suggesting that indeed 2014 things will turn around. But then again, people will bring up the issue of implementation and how much weight it carries. Well, this morning I've been joined by Sydney Casely-Hayford. He's not new to the show. He's a financial analyst. Good to see you, Sydney.
Good morning.
Happy New Year.
And a Happy New Year to you too.
All right, and then Nana Sebons is the Chief Executive Officer of the Private Enterprise Federation. Good to see you as well, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Good morning.
Good morning. Now, I'll come to you first, Sydney, because you were here last year. Mm-hmm. Not definitely talking about the economy, but some aspects of the economy. Do you think that indeed 2013 could have been better?
No. Time when graduate employment was very, very prolific. I remember times when the big organizations like Unilever, Ashanti Gold, etc. would actually come there looking for graduates to recruit them, and they would come to the universities even before you graduated, looking for the key people and the key performers. Those were times when graduate employment was necessary. With the military interregnums and the coup d'etats, of course, a lot of people left the country. A lot of the graduates left. And at that time, you did also have the opportunity to get a job very easily. Now that people started coming back, of course, the glut and the supply of labor on the market and also management material was prolific, so it became a challenge. In the recent times when we have become a more democratically organized society, it has been a lot more difficult because you can't get that kind of military slant that says, you must recruit 20,000 people and that's it, whether you have a choice or not, you will recruit them. So things have changed, and as we have produced more and more graduates, it has become more difficult because we don't have a market economy that can actually absorb the graduates in specific fields of knowledge. So that's the challenge we have now. And because we didn't particularly do anything much with it, programs like JIDA, LESDEP, YesDec, Beach Brigade, all of things that were supposed to enable an employment criteria wasn't focused at the graduates unemployed. It was focused more at the lower level. And what we have now seen on hindsight is that it was just a scheme for people to offload, funds. And I say this because I have filed a petition at SHRAJ questioning the JIDA issue. So I'm not saying anything underhand. I've gone public with it, and I think that government should sit up and investigate what we did with the funding from JIDA.
All right, we'll get into that very soon. Let me come to you, Private Enterprise Federation. Yes. From your point of view, 2013, of course, the president says it was a very difficult year, very challenging year. Let's get a sense of what or how it impacted on your activities.
I mean, look at government borrowings, deficit. It crowded our private sector from the credit markets. If you look at the third quarter Bank of Ghana release MPC statements, that there was a credit crunch. And basically there was also lack of applications for credit, because that means the private sector is not expecting a rosy or optimistic future. So they don't want to borrow and constrain their income stream for debt servicing of those borrowers. So for the private sector, 2013 was a very difficult year because as Sydney said, there were no activity and no action. And policies were not put in place for implementation that would ginger the economy. So if you look at that and you look at lack of expertise from the private sector on that side, lack of directive on the part of the public sector, 2013 didn't do well for us. We were a little optimistic coming into 2014. We haven't seen much. The president said a whole lot of things. We still have, if you look at the deficit for the three quarters in 2013, for 7-point-something billion, coming on top of 8.6. And we thought that they had addressed the issue and be able to reduce the deficit going forward. And if 3 quarters is 7.8, are we going to add additional 1 million? I expect that to be more than that. And if that's the case, The additional borrowing is going to crowd our private sector. We don't have capital mobilization in the system for private sector to tap in for investment. So these are areas that we really will want government to take action. So 2013 definitely was not a good year for private sector.
And what are you expecting in 2014? Would you want to have more say in these things?
Of course we have to have more say. We the people that make it happen.
Have you had a lot more say?
No, we have never had more say. We can address and have dialogue. Dialogue is talking to somebody else. It doesn't mean that they listen to you or they take your action or your position. But we will want government to listen more, because private sector is more efficient than public sector. And if you look at the hemorrhage going on every other ways in the public sector, I think the government should listen that if we were going to go anywhere, look, we have a borrowing credit of about 45% or 52% of GDP. Where are we going with that? If we were to turn some of the activities undertaken by public sector over to private sector for efficiency, then we will see a lot more activity jobs may be created. In Ghana, let me talk about food imports. We have about 6.3 million hectares of land available. We still import about 350 million rice, poultry, other things. Can't we put a policy in place and get the commercial farmers to produce for the local consumption? Why do we have to rely on imports? Because these are the things that hemorrhage our foreign exchange and then in a way devalue our city, and everybody pays for it. We have to import almost everything. But even within that context, we have post-harvest losses running to 35 to 55%. And we subsidize fertilizers. So what are we subsidizing? Waste. Because once you do productivity and it comes out to the market, you don't have preservation, you don't have processing. So the manufacturing sector should be engineered, should be supported. And when we say support, I think sometimes the public sector thinks that we're looking for handouts. No. We're looking for support to become profitable and in turn pay our taxes to influence the revenue generation of government.
You don't think that the President's New Year message that focused a lot on manufacturing was, significant enough to give you some hope that indeed 2014 things will happen?
Let's walk the talk. We've heard so many times. We know where the president is. We know what his position is. He's been supportive of private sector. But there has to be activity on the ground. We cannot just talk the rhetoric and let it flow and let it happen. The private sector should be engaged to perform and provide the mechanism for it to happen.
How do you expect to be engaged? I'll come to you, Sydney, very soon.
Now, let me give you one example in the 2013 budget, which said they were going to create 60,000 hectares for 60,000 youth employment. Okay. If you give that to 6 commercial farmers, they're going to create an empowerment program where you have at least about 3,000 youth in every 10,000 hectare of land. And with that, they can influence the growth of the youth into agriculture. This is not something you put into public domain for public activity with administrative capacity that costs a lot of money. You give it to the people that can perform and have performed over the years. We're talking about other issues where poultry. We have done some research. If we spend about 100 million to provide the yellow maize, the soybean, to provide the poultry feed, the poultry cake, we would be able to influence and cut down on the imports of poultry by at least 60%. It will create about 648,000 jobs.
Have you made this available to government?
Oh, we've been talking at length with everybody. We meet with them periodically, and we reiterate all these things. The facts are there. Do they want to listen? Do they want to hear? Let's put our money where our mouth is, and we can do some action.
Sydney, you seem to be nodding and agreeing.
Yes, I'm agreeing because there's a common thought, and as much as we discuss these things whenever we get together, see, the mistake we are making in this country, in my opinion, is government still thinks that it should be the one to provide for everybody and for everything. The whole social democracy philosophy that the NDC government pursues gives the impression that they can continue giving handouts and support everybody in every way. What we're saying is very, very simple. Look, to get an industry up and running, poultry industry as a simple example. We need to get some soya. We need to get some fish meal. We need to get some vegetable meal. We need to get some maize. And you mix it up and you get a good feed. And you've got an industry where you can actually feed chicks. All of the things that we are talking about, we grow in this country. So it's a no-brainer that we should actually be able to do it. There are companies who have set up good processing plants to enable them to produce the feed. So why don't we make sure that this can be done? And it doesn't take a lot. What it means is you stop the importation of the cheap products and you then ask the local people to actually get up, pull their bootstraps up and get working. And you give them a little incentive as you go along. Little incentives could be simple. You guarantee to them that you will buy back a lot of their produce. So they guarantee a market. Every one of us, our biggest challenge in any economy, in any business, is who is my buyer? Who is going to pay for my service? If I know my service is guaranteed and somebody gives me a contract to off-take the produce, I'm okay. I will produce as much as is required to be able to sell. And that is all that people require. So government's role should be to stop trying to give the handouts and pay for everything and move it on to a point where they create a market enabling environment so that people can actually sell into the market. We are only 25 million people in Ghana. And out of that 25 million, 70% of them are below 18. So the 30%, knock out another 10% for old age pensioners. You're only working with 20% of the population who have the capacity to purchase. 20% of 25 million is only 5 million people. And our per capita is not that much. So you don't have a huge market economy in this country when it comes to services and products. But we have an ECOWAS market. And we can therefore leverage ourselves, because Ghana is never going to be able to double its human capacity, its population in the next 10, 15 years. We will not be able to do it. So we're not going to grow the economy. The reason why you see the Chinese so successful and other countries like India and Indonesia, they have huge populations. China is dominating now because it's got billions of people. America's got 350 million, even though the
MPC met. They talked about the Monetary Policy Committee, that's the MPC, by the way, and lending rate was maintained at 16%. Does it worry you?
Very, very much. Policy rate, what is it supposed to do? It's supposed to influence other rates. Interbank rate, treasury rate, and then the lending rate.
You think it's too high?
Definitely, the platform is too high. If we had done some research that shows that in most countries, the policy rate is below inflation. So when you build the other risk factors into it and charge a risk premium, you come to a comfortable level. But when the Bank of Ghana policy rate is about 500 basis points above inflation, the platform is high. So when you plug in the risk premium, you go way above. So that is what is hurting private sector. How do you compete in an environment when borrowing rate is about 27-30%? And then when you go to the other side of the coin, the most vulnerable, the micro institutions, they borrow at 40-45 hours at Cape Coast. And I ran into a lady who is doing some little manufacturing. She's paying 9% a month. I nearly jump out of my seat, because she's borrowing from a micro institution who is borrowing from a universal bank to on-lend to her. So the Bank of Ghana policy should be informed in a way that it lowers the platform to lower the corresponding rates that are based on it. So definitely the MPC rate has to be reduced. We are talking and we're talking to...
Can we afford to reduce it?
You see, we should afford to reduce it, in the sense that we price ourselves so high so to attract participation, patronage from other partners. But if we were to look within and aggregate and mobilize capital from within, we should be able to reduce the policy rate, because the patronage is coming from within, which is, let me take the pension funds, the pension situation, which under the third tier, in Ghana we have about 12 million workers. Only 966 8,008 something, less than 1 million, are covered under any pension. If we were to attract at least the 10 plus million, 4 million out of the 10 plus, each person saving 25 cedis a month, we aggregate 1.2 billion. This is capital in the system that we're begging for investment destination. That if government flows a bond or anything, we'll be looking to patronize at any rate because they look to get some returns. But we don't do that. So we rely on outside patronage. And when they come in, we have to pay through our nose. When Ghana was borrowing at 7.8%, 7.5 in the last quarter on the Eurobond, on the bond that we floated, other countries like Botswana and Rwanda, we're paying about 5 point something. So we needed to attract because we needed the money at all costs. But at the end of the day, when we're going to pay back, we're hemorrhaging about 750 million that is going to retire the debt. So what we have to do is create a capital within that will have a ripple effect on how the borrowing rates go, how the lending rates go, and that will also influence. The government itself is even paying through the nose because the platform is high and government cannot do otherwise but to borrow from the market.
Okay, and I have to throw the next question to you. Inflation, we are targeting 9%. Before the end of the year, we're somewhere around 13.2%. You find this laughable, don't you? Can we make 9%? Sydney, you are the financial expert here.
I'm sorry, but I just wanted to, before I do the inflation, may I just say something about this MPC and the policy rate? You see, the idea behind the policy rate is it's supposed to be the benchmark for which banks borrow from the central bank. Yeah. So you've got that situation. The whole idea also is that the central bank will influence bank lending rates by lowering the policy rate. And by doing so, banks should therefore correspondingly lower their lending rates so that you and I can afford to go borrow money. Over the years, we have consistently lowered and raised the policy rate. It makes no impact on the lending rates of the banks. The conclusion, therefore, in real life, in practical terms, is that that policy rate is a waste of time. Mm-hmm. It's a complete waste of time. They're wasting our time and our money, sitting there and having meetings and drinking lots of tea and having, meat pie, and then coming to tell us that they have decided to keep the rate where it is. It's not making any impact on the economy. At the same time, the central bank has instituted a mechanism where they insist that banks should actually determine their base rates based on a defined formula. And the banks are declaring their base rates. Last week, I think Standard Chartered Bank or Barclays announced their base rate at 15.1%. Fine. 2 or 3 months ago, I read another bank, their base rate was 27%. The idea is the central bank says you cannot lend money at less than your base rate. In other words, you cannot give preferential treatment to those who come with huge chunks of money and offer them better rates than your base rate. So the banks are now sensitive to what they can and cannot charge. But you go to a bank and you are looking for a small loan, 200,000 cedis to be able to carry business on. They'll charge you base rate plus 10%. So it's costing you 37%. You cannot do business and expect the consumer to keep paying that kind of money. So products are priced way beyond the reach of the ordinary person on the street. The whole interest rate regime thing, all right, is so screwed up that we need to sit back and decide exactly what we are going to do. Because when your base rates are sitting at 27% and your treasury bill rate is at 19%, okay, there's something clearly wrong with what we are trying to do. And the central bank just can't seem to get its head around this. I have taken a group over a period of time, I think we did that last year. We went all the way to the Finance Committee of Parliament and we told them and explained to them that this thing was not working. They were supposed to call in the central bank governor and try and get an explanation and a rationalization. It never happened. So despite all the efforts of those of us in the private sector who are trying to push for lower interest rates, it's not happening. And that dovetails into inflation. Because at the end of the day, you have to be able to at least beat inflation to keep yourself going where you are. So if we are sitting at 13%, and we have to make a very clear distinction when we do these things, inflation is not just exactly how much you have. If you have a steady rate, and your rate is sitting at 10% consistently, and the inflation is not growing over a period of time, your pricing is okay. Because there's no change, you don't need to flex your pricing in order to take care of inflation. So it's the rate of change in inflation which is important, and not the actual inflation rate. However, you asked the question, can we make 9%? Yes, we can make 9% because in the past we have been good at changing the numbers to make them look good for the World Bank and the IMF statistics. And
so it's not realistic?
In my opinion, it's not. When I go to the market to go buy goods, and I keep a track of everything that I buy normally, every 3 months when I do a little quick review of the market, my prices are going up all the time. They're not slowing down. Just yesterday, I'm trying to buy tangerines illegally on the road. According to the AMA, I should not be buying tangerine, but I'm buying tangerine illegally on the side of the road. And they are charging me now one tangerine. They are asking me to pay 1 CD 50 pesos for 2 large tangerines. Okay. Now, just last year, before the end of the year, it was 2 for 1 CD. It's suddenly gone up 1/3. So they've increased the price. And these street hawkers, as I call them my kioskenomics, because these are my kiosk people trying to at least balance their equation in life. They have a very, very good feel for what it is costing them. They price things the way their pocket feels. They don't just arbitrarily raise it. So clearly, somebody who is providing the food from the market, from the farm gates, is asking them for more. And transportation has gone up, electricity has gone up, water has gone up, and they've built it all into it. Okay, the only thing that hasn't gone up is premix, and I can't for the life of me understand what it is about premix.
It's a political issue.
It's a political issue. Thank you very much. Now, I didn't say it, you said it. Okay,
yes, I know.
So you know, we're still playing those games, and they're still trying to give the impression that we are running a market economy, and it's not working. So will inflation come down to 9%? I have big doubts. So for as long as we are not a locally manufacturing base, and we are not an industry that actually does our own thing, we keep importing other people's inflation, and we add on to it because our electricity, our labor costs, and everything is also escalating. We will never, ever be able to get this inflation thing in control. And having said that, we come back to my age-old pet topic, that even within our national economy, our informal sector is left out. So we are not accounting for the informal sector.
We've not been creative enough.
We are too lazy to put in place the accounting mechanisms that will bring the informal sector more into the formal sector so we can measure it. Sometimes
you've not been impressed with the efforts so far?
I don't see which effort you're referring to.
Well, they've been talking about efforts to bring the informal sector, you know.
I mean,
you heard it.
Let's
walk the talk.
Yes. If you talk about bringing in the informal sector through corporate registration, not all the registered companies commence business, but they might be doing business otherwise in every other way. So there are ways of bringing the informal sector. If you dangle a bait of financing at a low cost long term, everybody will rush to pick it up. And by rushing to pick it up, the first and foremost is tax clearance certificate.
Yep.
They get their names registered in the tax books. And with that, you can track them. With that, you can tax them. By linking them to just a mere registration and tracking them through maybe business registration through GIPC new act, that ain't going to do it. The real efforts, the real activity that can bring the informal sector by influencing what they do and impacting how they do it.
Okay. Now, since you mentioned an act of Parliament, I know you've had issues with the Plant Breeders Bill.
Yes.
In Parliament.
Yes. Under the because this is to me the crux of the matter. Under the GSGDA, the Ghana Shared Growth Agenda, agriculture is supposed to lead the industrialization and development of Ghana. If we're going to do anything that impacts on that sector, it got to have an adequate consultative process, bring all the players in. Usually what we do when we say we have consultation with the private sector or with the sectors that were involved, we take people who cannot even understand what we're talking about. The expertise and technical knowledge to come to the table is very critical. for us to be able to articulate the sentiments and the interests of the people that are going to be impacted upon by these acts. So what they have rushed to me is a rush job to Parliament. Let's look at it, let's take it out, step up the consultative processes, engage the farmers. We have about 50% of our population involved in farming. And this is going to impact on the seeds they use, how they use it, and the liability for all the actions that they take. So we think that bill should be withdrawn, have a timeline, adequate consultations with technical people, farmers group, farmer-based organizations, input dealers, almost everybody. And then once we get to, it's not whether we're for it or we're not against it. Are we against it? No. What we're saying is it didn't have the adequate involvement and consultations with the expertise and an analytical basis to be able to rush that.
Okay. So the PEF,
yes.
The PEF reckons, the PEF reckons that indeed that bill should be withdrawn from Parliament.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Would you be disappointed if it gets, that?
It's not only in the interest of PEF. It's in the interest of the economy. It is in the interest of the nation. It's in the interest of the players in the agricultural sector. So it's not because PEF wants it, so PEF has to get it. But PEF is leading the point that let's look at it from the holistic consultative process. There might be some good points in it. There might be some issues that can be addressed when we do that. So we'll be very, very disappointed indeed. But it's going to come to haunt all of us, not just PEF.
Have you been following that debate with the plant breeders?
The plant breeders thing. It's tied into GMO and all that thing. There's only one company in the world that is promoting and pushing that thing. That's Monsanto.
Yeah.
So if they are here, they're only here for a selfish reason. And I honestly, I see no purpose in doing this. I see no purpose in doing this whatsoever. We are not at the point where we can say that we have exhausted all our productive capacity to increase the volume of maize and produce that we are doing. Why do you want to go and genetically modify it to increase it when you haven't even started tapping into what your potential can be?
We want to look posh.
We want to look posh.
Exactly.
And say we're a genetically modified organization and then stop being able to export any of that produce outside to other countries who
have their reasons.
I want to add this point that it's not a matter of whether we fall against GMOs. Let's look at the validity of the argument so we can say yes or no on the basis of the facts, right or wrong. But at least we have different varieties and hybrids of seeds. For the time being, is that what we want to do? Is the research going to be conducted within the Ghanaian research centers? Are they going to be led by Ghanaian researchers? What is going to happen? But let's bring everything to the table and discuss it.
All right. Now let's go back to what we were talking about earlier, 2014.
2014?
Yes. Utility tariffs also, somewhere up there. And the VAT has also taken off. I'm sure you would have something to say about it. But do you think that 2014 will be better than 2013? Of course, we expect that the following year would always be better than the previous one.
I think 2014 will be better than 2013. If not, we are in very, very deep trouble. And it's not wishful thinking that I'm saying this. I think that in the 2014 budget, government has put forward enough ideas that, if implemented, will make some change. I think that bringing the Bui Dam on stream is going to improve the power supply. I think the power supply has already improved.
Yes.
And I think that we are seeing less dumso going on. I think water supply is also improving. I think that if the utilities are giving a little bit more investment finance, or if they are able to attract a lot more investment finance, it will work. I have seen a few companies who have been giving licenses as independent power producers, and I think that whole idea of having separate power producers apart from ECG and other people actually feeding into the national grid will help to stabilize the electricity. I think the idea that once we have electricity, then productivity will take off is a wrong one. I think that you can have the power, but you're not going to, if you don't use it to effect and to add value, you will not get what you're looking for. So as much as we've got that supply, we have to now start looking at how it's going to impact the rural economy. If we don't decentralize our economy properly, and we still keep doing things at national, it won't work. So that the public-private partnership law must be passed as quickly as possible. We should ensure that that law is fully in place so that the districts and the municipalities can take advantage of it and they can grow their communities separately and independently of national programs. That, I think, will help. Being able to allocate infrastructure funds to infrastructure development without interference from government will work. But the way it was set up or put forward in the budget, it looks like the Minister of Finance is still going to be in charge of the infrastructure fund, which I think is wrong. Because if you look at the way we did the George Bush N1 highway, the Millennium Challenge account, independent organization, government did not have any ability to tap into it. It worked, and we have an excellent road that most of us think is a blessing that we have. So if we can modify some of those little things, I think 2014 will work. Okay. And of course, with VAT starting right at the beginning of the year, now I think government will generate enough revenues, or at least will generate significant income to be able to meet its program agenda. So we are hopeful.
Nana, briefly, 2014.
I think as Sydney said, we're hopeful that policies will be implemented in a way that allows private sector to efficiently deliver on the services and the needs of the nation. Taking into consideration that our manufacturing sector is very low, and with the power coming on board, even though we have independent IPPs, we have one off-taker, that's ECG, and that is the most inefficient in the distribution. And if we don't tackle that angle, we may be producing, but it's not affordable. It's at cost, and we keep increasing the pricing of utilities. So with that said, if we're going to allow efficiency in the distribution of utilities, then the private sector can be able to do the manufacturing and at manageable costs. If we do that, we can create jobs, the economy will grow, and government revenues will also be impacted on. So 2014 depends on how policies are implemented. If we're going to go the old age of public sector implementation, public sector administration, it's like developing private sector but managed by public sector. That ain't going to happen. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, you don't forget that we're going to win the World Cup. Huh?
Yes.
So once we win the World Cup,
that's going to
be the whole football industry will generate about 2 billion CDs worth of revenue.
Bless you. We're winning. Definitely. There's a message here. Actually, I have a slew of messages on this discussion, but there's one here that I definitely want to run by you. It's from Richard Abonsa, who's watching online from New York, and he says, "This is why I have left Ghana. I'm listening to your two guests, and they're making so much sense. But what do we see? The government of the day, not just this government, they give positions to people in their party, people who fund them, and the real people, the technocrats, are just walking around. Why can't Casely be made Minister of Finance?"
This is politics. tell Richard this is politics. And Sydney definitely doesn't want to be a Minister of Finance. So even if it's offered, I'll say no.
You will?
I don't want to be Minister of Finance.
Okay. You don't want to serve us.
It's not a matter of serving. I think
you can serve in different ways.
I can do much more than being locked into a Ministry of Finance.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time. Too bad we couldn't talk about PPP.
And I'm flattered, but
yeah. Thank you very much. Sydney Casely Hayford is a financial analyst, and Nanos Sabons is Chief Executive Officer of the Private Enterprise Federation. Thank you so much for your time.